They called her the luckiest girl in all of Russia. 19-year-old Marfa Sobakina, with her soft eyes and silken hair, had been chosen by Ivan IV, the Tsar of all Rus. But behind the cathedral bells and golden crowns, something unseen had already begun. A quiet death creeping beneath her bridal veil. The winter sun hung low over Moscow, casting a pale, cold light upon the grand cathedral. Snow drifted like white ashes, settling on the gilded domes that rose above the Kremlin walls. Inside, the air shimmered with incense and fear. Marfa stood before the Tsar, trembling. Her wedding gown shimmered with pearls and silver thread, yet her hands were cold as ice. The courtiers whispered, some in envy, others in pity. None dared to meet the Tsar's eyes. Ivan the Terrible was not a man to be loved. His stare could break the will of generals and priests alike. Yet today he wore a smile, thin, sharp, and unsettling. As the priests intoned their blessings, the bells outside tolled not in joy but in warning. For years Ivan had searched for a bride worthy of his name. Marfa was chosen from hundreds, gentle, devout, beautiful, untouched by politics. But those who knew the Tsar's court whispered that no woman survived his affection for long. After the vows, the palace erupted in feasts and firelight. Gold goblets overflowed with honeyed wine, and dancers spun to the sound of tambourines. Yet Marfa's mother, pale and anxious, pressed a small flask into her daughter's hand before the night ended. "A simple draught," she whispered, "to keep you strong, to ensure you bear him sons." Marfa smiled faintly, trusting her mother's trembling hands, never knowing the gift carried a curse. That night, in the grand bridal chamber, the Tsar approached her with the weight of an empire. Outside, the snow thickened, muting the city into silence. Inside, a single candle burned beside a goblet of the potion. Marfa drank, sweet at first, then bitter. A strange chill passed through her veins. She said nothing, not wanting to ruin her husband's first night as Tsar's bride. But by dawn, her body began to tremble uncontrollably. Her skin turned pale as porcelain. Her lips lost their color. The maids thought it was exhaustion, but the truth was far darker. In the quiet halls of the Kremlin, whispers began, "The bride is cursed." And somewhere in the shadows, Ivan watched. His expression unreadable, as if he already suspected betrayal. By morning, the wedding songs had faded into prayers. The Tsar's new bride could barely stand, and as the physicians rushed to her side, Ivan's voice broke the silence. "Someone," he said coldly, "has murdered my joy." The palace that once rang with laughter now echoed with prayers. Each step Marfa took sounded like a whisper from the grave. 15 days. That was all fate would grant her, though no one yet knew it. Morning light struggled to pierce the frost-covered windows of the Kremlin. Inside, the grand chambers smelled of wax and sickness. Marfa lay beneath heavy furs, her skin ghostly white, her breathing shallow. The Tsar's new bride looked more like a spirit than a queen. Ivan sat beside her, silent. His hand rested upon the arm of his throne-like chair, unmoving, yet his mind was a storm. The court physicians gathered, their robes brushing the marble floor. They whispered of fevers, of bad air, of curses. None dared to speak of poison. "Cure her," Ivan said flatly, his voice void of mercy. "Or I will cure you." The physicians bowed deeply, trembling. They mixed herbs, burned incense, even prayed to the Virgin. But nothing slowed Marfa's decline. Her once bright eyes dimmed each day, her laughter now only a memory echoing in the cold halls. The Tsar's rage grew. Servants vanished overnight. Maids who had attended the bride were dragged away for questioning. The Kremlin became a place of silence, pierced only by the screams of the accused echoing through its corridors. Yet through the terror, Marfa's mother stood outside the palace gates, begging to see her daughter. Her face was streaked with tears and snow. "Please, my child needs me," she cried to the guards. But they turned her away. Inside, Ivan paced like a beast in a cage. His paranoia fed on itself. His advisors whispered that sorcery might be involved, that rivals from noble families had sent dark blessings masked as gifts. And the Tsar, already half-mad from grief, believed them. He summoned a priest known for exorcisms. Holy water splashed across the room, candles flickered, and prayers thundered through the chamber. Marfa stirred, eyes flicking open for a brief, haunting second. She whispered something, soft, faint. No one could understand. Ivan leaned close, his hand brushing hers. "Marfa," he whispered. "Who did this to you?" Her lips moved once more. A single tear slid down her cheek. Then her body convulsed and she fell still again. The priest crossed himself. It is beyond mortal hands now. That night, Ivan ordered a new investigation. The guards ransacked the Sobakina household. Hidden beneath the floorboards, they found remnants of herbs and dried leaves, the same ingredients said to bring fertility or death. When the Tsar heard this, his silence shattered into a roar that shook the hall. "Bring me her mother," he screamed. "If my bride dies, so will every liar who touched her fate." The city froze in terror. The Tsar's wrath had found a target, the woman who gave life to the doomed bride. And as Marfa's breathing weakened to a whisper, the clock of her 15 days began to tick. The Kremlin had become a tomb. Where wedding bells once rang, now echoed screams. And at its heart sat Ivan the Terrible, a king in love, a husband betrayed, and a god of vengeance reborn. The 13th day after the wedding arrived with no dawn. Heavy clouds smothered Moscow in a colorless twilight. The snow, once pure, now carried the footprints of soldiers and the blood of the condemned. Ivan's fury had consumed the court. Anyone who had touched Marfa's dowry, her servants, even her childhood nurse, all were dragged to the dungeons. The Tsar demanded names, but he trusted no answers. The chill of paranoia wrapped tighter around him, a serpent whispering that everyone had conspired to steal his joy. Marfa's chamber had turned into a battlefield of incense and fear. The priests still prayed, the physicians still mixed useless potions. Her pulse grew weaker with each hour, but her face, pale and still, looked almost serene, like a saint waiting to ascend. Ivan knelt beside her bed, his crown set aside, his eyes hollow. "Why must heaven mock me?" he muttered. "Why give me an angel only to watch her die?" But heaven gave no answer. Only the soft creak of the floorboards and the hiss of the candles filled the silence. By that afternoon, the guards had brought in Marfa's mother, bound, trembling, and speechless. The old woman's eyes were red from tears. She collapsed before the throne, clutching her hands together. "My Tsar," she cried. "I swear by the Holy Cross, and I wished only to protect her. The draft was meant to help her bear your sons. I did not know it would harm her." Ivan's gaze was like ice. "Poison," he said softly, "wears many masks. Love among them." The court held its breath. For a moment it seemed the Tsar might show mercy, but then Marfa's cough echoed from the chamber beyond, a sound wet and broken like life tearing itself away. Ivan rose from his throne, his cloak sweeping across the marble floor. "Take her," he ordered. "Let her see what her love has done." The guards dragged the mother through the corridor to Marfa's bedchamber. The old woman fell to her knees beside her daughter, sobbing. Marfa's fingers twitched once as if she recognized the familiar voice, then fell still again. Ivan stood in the doorway, his shadow falling over both women. His eyes shone with something far darker than grief, something divine in its cruelty. "You gave birth to my queen," he said, "and now you will bury her." Outside, the bells of Moscow began to toll again, not for marriage, but for judgment. By nightfall, the Sobakina estate was seized. Servants were executed in the snow. Rumors spread through the streets that the Tsar had gone mad, that he spoke to the ghost of his dying bride. In his private chamber, Ivan knelt before the icon of the Virgin, tears cutting through the ash on his face. "If she dies," he whispered, "then let every mother know my pain." Lightning flashed across the winter sky, illuminating the golden towers like burning spears. The storm outside had found its reflection in the storm within. As the 14th day ended, Marfa's breathing slowed to a fragile rhythm, a candle's last flicker. Ivan sat beside her, whispering her name over and over. But by morning, Russia would awaken to silence. When dawn came, Moscow was silent. No bells rang. No prayers were sung. Only a single cry echoed through the Kremlin halls, a sound so raw, so human that even the ravens took flight. Marfa Sobakina, the Tsarina of Russia for 15 fleeting days, was dead. Her chamber was dim, lit by candles that had burned all night. Her body lay still beneath white silk, her face peaceful, too peaceful, as if she had simply drifted into sleep. The faint scent of herbs still hung in the air, the last whisper of the potion that had destroyed her. Ivan entered slowly, each step echoing like a verdict. The guards bowed their heads and backed away. No one dared to speak. He stopped beside her bed and looked down. For a long while he said nothing. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch her cheek. Still cold. "You were to bear the sons of Russia," he whispered. "Now you bear only silence." The Tsar's eyes darkened. Something inside him snapped, quietly, completely. He turned to his priests. "Prepare her for burial. No tears, no songs. She was poisoned by love, and love deserves no hymns." The court obeyed in terror. Servants draped the halls in black cloth. The scent of burning incense mixed with the metallic tang of fear. Outside, the people whispered that the Tsarina had been cursed, that her beauty had been too pure for this world. Some said the devil himself had taken her. Others said it was Ivan's madness that killed her, not poison at all. The truth no longer mattered. The legend had already begun. That night, Ivan summoned his advisors. His face was pale, hollow, unrecognizable. "From this day forward," he said, "trust dies with her. There will be no mercy for liars, no peace for traitors." One of his boyars dared to speak. "Your Majesty, perhaps—" "Silence," Ivan hissed. "You speak of reason to a man who has lost his reason." He stood, his voice rising to a roar that shook the chamber. "She will not be the last to die for this. Every whisper, every deceit, every shadow that mocks my crown will burn." The room fell deathly quiet. The funeral was unlike any Russia had seen. Beneath gray skies, Marfa's coffin was carried through the snow toward the monastery at Alexandrov. No choirs sang. Only the howling wind followed her procession. Women wept in secret, afraid of the Tsar's wrath. As the coffin was lowered into the frozen ground, Ivan knelt beside it. His hand brushed the snow from the wood and his voice cracked. "They said I was terrible," he whispered. "But you made me human. And for that, God punished me." He pressed his forehead against the coffin. "Forgive me, my queen." When he rose, his eyes were no longer the eyes of a man. They were the eyes of a ruler who had buried the last piece of his heart. That night, back within the Kremlin walls, Ivan gathered his guards, the oprichniki, his black-clad agents of death. He pointed toward the city. "Find them all," he said. "Every soul who smiled at her death, every whisperer who doubted my throne. Cleanse this empire in fire." The guards bowed and vanished into the snowstorm. Cliffhanger. The Tsarina was dead. But her death was only the beginning, the spark that would ignite a reign of terror Russia had never seen before. And in the echo of her name, Ivan the Terrible became truly terrible. The wind howled through the Kremlin towers like a beast mourning its master. Days turned into weeks, yet Ivan the Terrible did not rest. He walked the echoing halls alone, a man haunted not by ghosts but by memory. Marfa Sobakina's name was forbidden to be spoken aloud, but every candle that flickered, every shadow that moved seemed to whisper it anyway. "Marfa, Marfa," they said. The Tsar no longer slept. He sat beside her old chamber door, muttering to himself in a low, broken tone. A voice too soft for an emperor, too lost for a man who once ruled the world through fear. "She was pure," he said to no one, "and the world killed her." He ordered the execution of her mother, believing she had poisoned her own daughter. The woman screamed her innocence until her last breath, but mercy was no longer a language Ivan understood. Soon others followed, her maids, her healers, her distant relatives, each dragged into dark cellars beneath the Kremlin, each accused of witchcraft or deceit. Blood began to stain the snow of Moscow. The people started to whisper again, not about Marfa, but about Ivan. They said the Tsar had gone mad, that grief had broken him in ways no blade could, that the death of one innocent girl had turned the mightiest ruler in the East into a creature of vengeance. Yet for Ivan, vengeance was not enough. He believed himself cursed, by love, by God, by the very empire he built. He turned his pain into policy. The oprichnina, his secret army of black-clad riders, swept through Russia like a plague. Cities burned, families vanished. The land that once celebrated his wedding now trembled at his name. And always in his dreams she returned. Marfa, standing in white, her eyes calm, her lips blue from poison. She said nothing, just looked at him with the quiet sorrow of someone who had loved too deeply and died too young. Each time Ivan woke screaming. Years passed. The Tsar grew older, his beard white, his eyes empty. One winter night he entered the same church where Marfa had once knelt as a bride. He stood before her portrait, painted after her death, her beauty immortalized in silence. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I thought I could rule the world." But I couldn't even save you. A candle flickered. The light trembled over her painted face. He even knelt and placed a single white flower beneath the frame. The last gift of a broken king. Historians would later call her story a tragedy of superstition and fear. They would say her death marked the moment when love itself became dangerous in the house of the Tsar. But among the peasants, mothers told another tale, a warning whispered to their daughters before marriage. Never drink what promises love, for even a Tsar's bride can die from a mother's hope. And so, the name Marfa Sobakina lived on, not as a queen, not as a saint, but as a symbol of how love, power, and fear can destroy even the purest heart. Her death ended 15 days after her wedding, but her ghost lingered for centuries, forever watching the empire built on her grave.